He gazed at me directly into the eyes. 25 years of common bed, raising kids, paying bills, burying hopes together, and told me a firm voice which remains etched in memory. I don't love you anymore. I've got someone else and she makes me alive again. Rebirth alive. That was the word. As if I had been gradually murdering him, as if I had sucked the life out of his veins all these years. As if my sacrifices, patience, loyalty had been invented especially for being handcuffs around his neck. I stiffened. My hands could not jerk. My mouth open but silent. The kitchen clock ticked like a hammer behind his sentences. I honestly could have sworn that I heard the rumble of the refrigerator, a faint buzzing of a light bulb above. Any small noise now enormous, because the world was taunting me with itchers when mine fell apart. She was younger. Admitted that much without protest. She understands me, he said. She makes me laugh again. You don't. My chest thudded so forcefully I feared it would rip my chest wide open. Marriage of 25 years summarized in a sentence. I had prepared his favorite stew the previous night. The aroma of slow-cooked meat and rosemary wafted, but then it went bad on my nostrils. I recalled how I had stirred it gently, humming a little, anticipating the look on how his face would mollify when he returned home exhausted. That face. The one now gazing at me with not a scintilla of remorse, merely relief. Like a captive already emerging into freedom. Who is she? I breathed quietly. He gazed at hands, then at me again, with a sad smile that said it all. You don't know her. She's younger. Fresh. She makes me feel like I am myself again. Younger. That word cut deeper than any blade. I recalled the stretch marks on my abdomen, the furrows around my eyes, the threads of silver hair I had ceased bothering to dye. All the badges of a life lived for devotion for him, for our family. Badges of sleepless nights spent with feverish children while he slept next to me, snoring away. Badges of decades of shift work, of biting my tongue when there was little money. Badges of being his support, his protection, his silent shadow. And those scars were then my offense. I wanted to yell, to break the bowls carefully arrayed beside the sink, to grasp him by the neck and rattle the smile off his face. I didn't. I stood there, holding the counter edge with both hands until the skin burned white. He kept speaking. About how he didn't want to hurt me, how he still had feelings for me, how he wanted us both to stay friends. The ridiculousness of it pierced through my chest with glass shards. Stay friends. After 25 years, he was abandoning me for a woman who could make him experience butterflies. I recall looking at his lips, observing them speaking, words flowing like venom, but I did not hear all of them. My head was reels, body was trembling. I could not help but think, this cannot be occurring. Not after all of it. And that's when something inside me broke. I recall the day I first met him. We were both very young. He was 23. I was 21 years old. He had this mischievous, boyish smile that caught the attention of every person in the room, but when he gazed at me, I knew I was elected. At that time he had little, a broken-down automobile, a pocket full of money, and a brain full of visions that repelled plenty of people. Not me, though. I trusted him, perhaps more than he trusted himself. We constructed it all together. I worked special shifts for his tuition. I foregone holidays, dressed in worn clothing, yet he went out for business dinners, shook hands with those who perceived him as a star on the rise, and I was proud. I was proud to be on his side, even behind the scenes. I was there when he got his first large contract. I sat up with him during nights of anxiety, during setbacks and false promises. I was there when he was ill and could not leave his bed, forcing feed him soup and dabbing at his forehead. I was there when his mother passed away, holding him while he bawled like a baby. And I was there when our children were birthed, when he held them close, whispering forever promises. Promises I thought were meaningful. But now, looking at him across that kitchen, I understood those promises had a sell date mine. The evening he broke the news, I could not sleep. I lay on the bed gazing at the ceiling, the vacuum next to me already noisier than any silence I had ever experienced. I continued wondering about all the ways I had contoured myself within his life, become the cement cementing all the pieces into place. And for what? For him to toss it aside for somebody with more silky skin and a more vibrant laugh? I went into the bathroom at dawn and gazed at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, puffy, from all the crying, puffy from being broken down. I got closer, examining every wrinkle, every spot, every evidence of time etched on me. I loathed myself then. I loathed what I was looking at because I thought perhaps he was correct. Perhaps I wasn't sufficient anymore. But then something changed. I recalled the sacrifices I had given, the years of devotion, of forbearance, of patience, and gradually a new thought insinuated, no, I was sufficient. I had always been sufficient for 1,000,000 times over. He had been incapable of seeing it. That's when the fire ignited. Smidgen silent, but ablaze. If he thought he could smile on his way out, if he thought he could leave me broken and still be the hero in his own damn story, then he did not know me at all. I cleaned off my tears, gazed at the mirror once more, and said to my reflection, this isn't the end. This is when I begin. That was the evening when I made up my mind. I would not kneel. I would not beguile. I would not make him believe that his joy was bought at the expense of my destruction. He had thrown the match, but I would teach him what it was like to stand inside the flames. And I assure you, the smile that lay on his face when he left that kitchen would be the last one that he'd ever have on me at a cost. The next morning when I talked to myself in the mirror, I was a stranger at home. The walls were still the same beige he had picked when he first redid them. The pictures on the mantel still had us grinning on our better years, but there was a vacuity now. Each corner of the house belonged loud with him. The aroma of his cologne still lingered on the closet, and when I yanked the drawer open for a sweater, I spotted his socks sitting tidily on top of mine. For a moment, I thought about ripping them into pieces with the kitchen scissor cutting thingies. My hands shook at the thought, but I didn't. Not yet. Because anger without a plan is just whining. And I was tired of being whiny in his life. I acted like any other day had passed, without anything changing. I brewed coffee. I watered the plants next to the window. I fed the cat even. But on the inside, I was adding numbers, observing, documenting mentally. If he thought that he could destroy 25 years of a person's life, then he was about to find out how much of a fool he was being. He returned home late that night. I heard the growling garage door, then the sound of his shoes clicking down the hall. My chest closed up, but I failed to let it show. A silent, "Dinner's on the stove," greeted him from me. My tone didn't tremble, although my insides convulsed. He eyed me warily, as a man probing the ice ere he stepped onto a frozen pond. "Thanks," he growled and went to undress. I watched him when he got back, hair combed back with extra attention than he had ever been, a shirt pressed fresh. He had a bounce in his step, a liftiness to his shoulders. That's when it occurred to me, he wasn't ashamed. He wasn't even torn. He believed he had already won. I needed to scream again, but I did not. I smiled instead. A so peaceful smile, it should have bothered him, for he frowned for a moment, then gazed away. "Long day," I said across from him at the table. "Yeah," he replied, spearing at food on the plate. "Everything is complicated at the moment. Intricate." That was how he defined cheating on his wife. I nodded, drinking my water. Everything will probably work out. For the first time in days, he had met my gaze. Perhaps he had been waiting for tears, begging, accusations. But I provided neither. Only calmness. Only patience. And that was when I made up my mind. If he needed a war, I won't oppose him with fists. I'd oppose him with silence, with calmness, with the only arm he didn't anticipate me carrying, control. The rest of the weeks were a bizarre act. By day, I was the obedient wife, managing the home, addressing him politely, never raising my voice. At night, when he believed I was asleep, I remained awake, listening for the subtle clicking of his fingers on the phone, the suppressed laugh he couldn't hold down. I committed every little thing, the hours, the faces, the alibis to memory. He didn't know I saw. He didn't know I was creating a reckoning of his betrayals in my head, brick on top of brick. One night, when he told me he was working late, I tailed him. My hands trembled grasping the steering wheel, following him at a distance at a safe pace. He did not go towards the office. He turned onto a silent street close to the cafes around downtown area. I parked 2 blocks down the road and observed him from the shadows, getting out, putting on adjusting his tie, then heading towards the glow of a small eatery. And there she was. She was young, as he had promised her. Long hair, a laugh that rang too clear into the night. She wrapped her arms around his neck as if they had known one another for eternity, and he hugged her close as a man resurrected. The vision almost snapped me in two. I held the steering wheel so tight my hands cramped up. My throat ached with the effort of held-back yelps. But I didn't exit. I didn't make a scene. Because that night wasn't about anger. It was about verification. Evidence. Confirmation. As I drove home, the sobbing at last broke loose. They blurred the street lamps, streamed down across my face, and wetted the collar of my sweater. But with each grieve, something other formed within me. Determination. A few days after, I retrieved the old box from the rear of the closet. In it were papers, balls, old notebooks, receipt. I began assembling the puzzle of our life, and what I would carry with me from it. Because here's what he had lost sight of while he had been pursuing youth. I had been holding the family together. I had dealt with the finances, the bills, tracked every last expense. I knew more about our property, our liabilities, our history than he ever would. He thought he was dumping me for a new, bright page. But I had the whole book in my hands. The fight happened earlier than I had thought. One Saturday morning, there he was sitting across from me at the table, drinking his coffee, when at last he said it straight out, "I believe it's time for us to discuss separation." His tone was cautious, practiced, as if he was selling a business pitch. I put down my cup carefully, glared at him directly, and said, "And what do you exactly expect that you get to leave behind?" He jerked, surprised. "What are you saying?" I pushed forward. "Do you honestly believe you can have her and still maintain the life that I provided for you? Do you believe you can rob me of 25 years and still have that little smile on your face?" For the first time, I witnessed a crack in his calmness. His jaws went tight, eyes just narrowing a little. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I just said, "If you want out, that's okay. But you'll lose more than me in the deal. And when I am done, you won't have much left to gloat about." The quiet that fell after was dense, charged. He attempted at laughter, growling something about me being dramatic, but I saw it, the glimmer of fear behind his eyes. And there I knew. The game had shifted at last. I had been the silent investor, the shadow, the tolerant Vina for so long. But not anymore. This time, I wasn't going to sit back and let him choose the conclusion of our story. This time, the conclusion would be mine. After that breakfast conversation, the house never felt the same. He carried himself differently, stiffer, guarded, like he'd just realized I wasn't the fragile, naive wife he'd pegged me as. Still, he kept up that smug calm. Still slipped his phone into his pocket when it buzzed. Still came home with that faint trace of someone else's perfume. But now he was watching me, waiting for me to crack. And I didn't. I went on with my days, cooking, cleaning, smiling when I had to. But underneath that quiet routine, I was moving, preparing. The first step was a lawyer. Not a family friend who'd soften the blow. Not someone I pulled out of the yellow pages. No, I found a fighter. A woman with a reputation for tearing through cases like a wolf on a carcass. I told her everything. The affair, the money, the sacrifices I'd made. She listened, scribbling notes, eyes glinting with something close to satisfaction. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "He's in for a storm he doesn't see coming." That line alone felt like air in my lungs. Next came the bank. Quietly, carefully, I opened an account of my own. I started setting money aside, one transaction at a time, building a safety net he couldn't touch. Not reckless, methodical. But the hardest part was telling the kids. Both in their 20s, building their own lives. I hated pulling them into this. But I wasn't going to let him twist the story, make himself the man who just fell out of love. So one evening, I had them over. We sat in the living room under the soft glow of the lamp, and I told them the truth. Not the sugar-coated version. The truth. My son's jaw tightened. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. When I finished, my son asked, "So he's leaving you for her?" I nodded. My daughter whispered, "After everything you've done for him?" I couldn't answer. I just reached out, took their hands, and held them. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. He might have found someone to stroke his ego, but I had raised two people who saw me, who valued me in ways he never could. Meanwhile, he started getting bold. Maybe he thought my silence was surrender. He stayed out later, brushed off my questions with half-smiles. One night, when he came home past midnight, I tested him. "Did you enjoy your date?" I asked, folding laundry. He froze. "What are you talking about?" "The restaurant on 8th Street. The one with the red awning." "How was the food?" The color drained from his face. I was at work. I laughed softly. "Sure. Work." His hands trembled as he poured himself a drink. For the first time, he was unsteady. And I knew the ground beneath him was starting to crack. As weeks passed, I stopped cooking his favorite meals, stopped ironing his shirts, stopped making those small gestures of care he'd taken for granted. At first subtle, but he noticed. One evening he snapped, "Why have you been so cold lately?" I turned to him. "Cold? You want to talk about cold?" His eyes flickered. "I didn't mean." "No," I cut in, voice sharp. "You don't get to call me cold. Not after what you've done." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came, because deep down, he knew there was no defense. That night, as he tossed and turned beside me, I thought about the man who once told me he felt alive again. That man was unraveling, and I wasn't finished. The turning point came at a wedding. We both went, because appearances demanded it. People still thought we were a couple, and he hated every second. I could see it in the way he fidgeted, the way his eyes searched the room for escape. At one point, an old family friend leaned in and whispered, "He's not worth your tears. You're stronger than him." I smiled politely, but inside, her words caught fire. Stronger than him. Exactly. Later, on the drive home, I broke the silence. "You want to know the difference between you and me?" He glanced over, irritated. "What?" "You need someone else to feel alive." "I make myself alive." He didn't answer. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. And for the first time, I saw it, the ashes of that smile he wore when he spoke of her. He was starting to realize the truth. The power he thought he had over me was slipping, grain by grain, through his fingers. By the end of that month, I was ready. The lawyer had everything. The money was secured. The kids knew. All that was left was the confrontation. And I wanted it to burn. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. The kind of night where the air feels heavy, where the streets shine with reflections, and everything smells like an ending. He came home late, shirt rumpled, hair damp from the rain. I was waiting at the dining table, papers stacked neatly in front of me. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my ears. But my face was calm. Calm like a storm that knows it's about to tear a house apart. He tossed his keys on the counter and gave me that half-smile, the same one he'd probably flashed at her 100 times. "What's all this?" he asked, nodding at the papers. I gestured for him to sit. "It's time to stop pretending, don't you think?" He frowned, lowering himself into the chair slowly, like he wasn't sure the ground beneath him would hold. "Pretending about what?" I slid the first page across the table. "A bank statement. About your late nights. Your phone calls. Your complications." His jaw tightened. "You've been spying on me?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "No. You've been flaunting it." I just stopped closing my eyes. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. My voice was sharp, steady. "I know about her. The dinners. The gifts. Every lie you've told. And I know this too, for 25 years, I carried this family while you built your little fantasy." The color drained from his face. He leaned back, arms crossed like a shield. "You don't understand." "Don't you dare," I snapped. The force in my voice surprised even me. Don't you dare tell me I don't understand. I lived through every year of your failures. I held this family together when you fell apart. I gave you everything. And you're ready to throw it away for someone who wasn't even alive when we said our vows. For a second, he looked small, weak. But then the smugness crept back. Look, I'm not saying you weren't good to me. You were. But people change. I've changed. I deserve to be happy. That word, deserve, cut like a blade. Deserve. I repeated, my voice low, laced with venom. You deserve to lose everything. And I'll make sure you do. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I pushed the stack of papers toward him. I've spoken to a lawyer. Every account. Every asset. Every secret you thought you had. I know them all. You think you're walking away clean? No. You're walking into ashes. His hands trembled as he stared down at the papers. For once, he had no words. I leaned in, holding his gaze. Do you think she'll want you when the money's gone? When you're left with nothing but your lies and that tired reflection? Do you think she'll hold you the way I did when you failed? When you had nothing but arrogance and a dream? His lips parted, but no sound came. She's in love with the man you are on borrowed time, I said. The man I built. And I'm taking him back, piece by piece. The silence was thick. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. He sat there, hunched, staring at the documents as if they might rearrange into an escape route. Finally, he whispered, You wouldn't. I leaned back, arms folded. Try me. It didn't end with shouting. No slammed doors. Just him sitting there, pale and shaken, while I walked away. For years, he had decided when arguments ended. Not this time. This time, I stood up first. I went to bed. He stayed at the table with his lies. The next morning, he was different. Moving slower, quieter, glancing at me like I was someone he couldn't predict anymore. The smile was gone. The phone stayed in his pocket. For the first time, it looked like the weight of his choices was crushing him. And me? I felt lighter. Not because the hurt had vanished. It still clung like smoke, but because I wasn't powerless anymore. I took a walk that morning. The rain had cleared, the air sharp and clean. Passing shop windows, I caught glimpses of myself. Tired, yes. But behind the lines and shadows, I saw something I hadn't in years, strength. I thought about everything I'd lost to him. Every chance I'd passed up, every part of myself I'd buried to keep him standing. And I thought, never again. The kids came over that weekend. We sat in the living room, the tension almost visible in the air. He tried to explain, tried to reach for them, but they weren't having it. My daughter's voice shook as she glared at him. Do you even understand what you've done? To her? To us. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he started. But you did. My son cut in, sharp as a blade. And now you live with it. The silence that followed was brutal. He looked at me, searching for help, but I gave him nothing. Because here's the truth. When a man betrays his wife, he doesn't just betray her. He betrays every bond, every memory, every life connected to theirs. And for the first time, he was seeing that weight reflected in his own children's faces. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. The pain was still there, heavy and raw, but beneath it pulsed something new, freedom. For years, I'd lived in his shadow, his needs, his ambitions, his mistakes. But now, finally, I was stepping into my own light. The war wasn't over. The hardest parts were still ahead. But I had already won the most important battle, the one for myself. And in his hollow eyes, in his bent shoulders, I could see he knew it too. After the confrontation, the house felt like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. Quiet, still, but heavy with the knowledge that nothing would ever be rebuilt the same way again. He didn't leave, but he avoided me. He still ate dinner at the table, still slept under the same roof. But the air between us was poisoned. His words grew fewer, his smiles rarer, and when his eyes did flick to mine, there was a nervous edge in them, like he no longer recognized the woman sitting across from him. And maybe he didn't. Because I wasn't the wife who bent until she broke anymore. I wasn't the one who swallowed her pain to keep the peace. That woman had burned away. What stood in her place was someone unpredictable, someone he couldn't control. I started reclaiming myself, one small step at a time. I cut my hair short and let the gray show. I bought a dress I didn't need, the kind that made me feel alive in my own skin again. I signed up for a pottery class downtown, something I'd always wanted but never had time for. That first night at the wheel, with clay soft beneath my hands, something loosened inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't wife or mother or caretaker. I was just me. And it was terrifying. But it was also freedom. Meanwhile, he began to unravel. His phone buzzed less. The late-night laughter I once overheard was gone. He was on edge, snapping at the tiniest things. The dishwasher, the cat, the mail arriving late. One night, pacing like a trapped animal, I heard him mutter, "She doesn't understand." I looked up from my book. Oh? And what exactly doesn't she understand? He froze. Nothing. Forget it. But I saw it. The crack. The doubt. And inside me, a small, wicked satisfaction bloomed. The kids started visiting more often. Unspoken but steady. They'd bring groceries, sit for coffee, share old stories. Slowly, their gaze shifted. They didn't just see Mom anymore. They saw a woman standing tall, stronger than the man who tried to break her. One afternoon, my daughter hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you." Those words healed places in me I hadn't even realized were still bleeding. But him? He kept sinking. The younger, fresher woman wasn't so accommodating anymore. I didn't need to ask. I saw it in the slump of his shoulders, the hollow in his eyes when he dragged himself through the door. That's the thing about affairs. They burn hot, but fast. They're built on illusions and stolen moments. But illusions don't survive bills, expectations, or everyday life. And his fantasy was crumbling. He tried to fake it at first, leaving the house with swagger, returning with silence. One night, he slammed the door so hard the frames rattled. I didn't ask. I just sipped my tea and kept reading. And that silence, that calm refusal to care, cut him deeper than any fight ever could. It all came to a head at a dinner party. A colleagues' gathering, one we couldn't avoid. I wore the new dress, and when I walked in, heads turned. Not because I was flawless or young, but because I carried myself differently. I wasn't standing in his shadow. I was whole, alive, separate. I saw the whispers. People knew. Maybe not the details, but they knew. And so did he. For the first time, he looked small beside me. That night, back home, he snapped. "Why are you acting like this?" he demanded. "Like what?" I slipped off my heels. "Like you don't care. Like none of this matters to you." I met his eyes. Because it doesn't. Not anymore. His mouth opened, closed. He stood trembling, empty of words, stripped of power. The weeks that followed were filled with small victories. I painted the kitchen a new color. I left more. I went out with friends I hadn't seen in years. I slept through the night again. And him? He sat at the table with untouched dinners, shoulders hunched, whispering things like, "I don't know who I am anymore." I never answered. That wasn't my burden anymore. Here's the thing about betrayal. At first, it feels like the end of your story. Like someone ripped the last chapter out of your hands. But day by day, as I pieced myself back together, I realized it wasn't the end. It was only the prologue. And him? He was just a footnote now. At least that's what I thought. Until the phone rang one night. It was her. The mistress. And the words she spoke changed everything. When I answered the phone, I didn't recognize the voice at first. Soft. Uncertain. Shaking. "Is this his wife?" she asked. My grip on the receiver tightened. I could hear faint traffic behind her, that restless hum of a busy street. "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's calling?" A pause. A shaky breath. "It's me. I think you know who I am." The mistress. The girl who had stolen his late nights, his attention, his lies. The one who was supposed to make him feel alive again. I sat down, keeping my voice steady. "What do you want?" Her words tumbled out fast, nervous. "I didn't know how else to reach you. He told me so many things, and now I don't know what's true anymore." I almost laughed. The audacity of her calling me for clarity. But something in her voice stopped me. She didn't sound triumphant. She didn't sound like the winner of some cruel game. She sounded broken. So I listened. She told me everything. How he'd painted me as cold, distant, joyless. How he claimed he'd been trapped in a loveless marriage, chained to responsibilities that had suffocated him. How she'd believed him at first, because he was charming, attentive, showering her with affection she thought was real. Then came the cracks. The mood swings. The excuses. The same lies he'd once fed me now spilling into her life. She started noticing inconsistencies, stories that didn't add up, silences too long, bitterness creeping into their happiest moments. And now, he was angry. With her. With me. With everyone. I thought I was saving him, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I think I was just the distraction he needed. Her words landed heavy, like stones. For years, I'd pictured her as a thief, a cruel temptress who'd stolen what was mine. But now, listening to her tremble on the other end of the line, I realized she was just another one of his victims. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't mean to hurt you. If I had really known." I cut her off, sharper than I meant to. "You did know. Maybe not all of it, but you knew he was married. You knew he had a family. You knew I existed." Silence. Her breath hitched. "You're right." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Look, I don't need your apology. What's done is done. But if you're calling me because you think I'll fight for him, you're wrong. He's yours now. If you want him, you can have him." Her next words stunned me. "I don't want him anymore." For a moment, I thought I misheard. "What?" Her voice steadied, tinged with bitterness. "I thought he was everything. I thought I was special. But he's just empty. The charm fades, and all that's left is a man who takes and takes until there's nothing left of you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Hearing her describe him felt like listening to my own diary read aloud by a stranger. When I hung up, I sat there in silence. Rain tapped against the window. The house around me was still and quiet. For years, I had carried the weight of his betrayal like it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't pretty enough. Maybe I wasn't fun enough. Maybe I had grown old too quickly, tired too easily, lost the spark that once made me desirable. But now I saw it clearly. It was never about me. It was never about her. It was about him. He was a man who would always chase the next thing, the next thrill, the next distraction to fill the void inside him. And no one, not me, not her, not anyone, could ever fill it. That realization was like a release. The chains I'd been dragging suddenly fell loose. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his coffee, staring into it like it held answers. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slumped. Without looking up, he said, "She left me." I didn't even blink. "She said she can't do this anymore. That I'm toxic." His voice cracked on the word, like it was foreign to him. I poured myself tea, sat across from him, met his eyes. She finally figured out what I already knew. He flinched, but didn't argue. For the first time, he had no excuses. No charm. No defense. Just silence. Over the next few days, he tried, in his clumsy way, to mend the wreckage. Lingering near me, asking if I needed anything, offering to fix small things around the house. One evening, he even cooked dinner, something he hadn't done in years. But it was too late. Every gesture felt hollow, like a man scrambling to save himself from drowning, not to save the marriage he had sunk. At one point, he even said, "Maybe we can start over." I laughed. Not cruelly, but with a sadness so deep it startled him. "Start over? You burned it down. There's nothing left to start from." His face fell, and I swear, for a moment, I saw true regret in his eyes. But regret wasn't love. Regret wasn't respect. And regret wasn't enough to erase 25 years of betrayal. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Because I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I wasn't waiting for apologies or explanations. I wasn't waiting for him to finally see my worth. I already knew my worth. And from that moment on, I was living for me. But life has a cruel way of testing new strength. Just when I thought I had walked through the worst of it, just when I thought I could finally breathe, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't her voice. It was the hospital. The voice on the other end of the phone was clinical, steady, the kind of tone doctors use when they've said the same words too many times. Your husband has been admitted. He collapsed at work. We need you to come immediately. For a second, the world blurred. I gripped the counter with one hand, the phone with the other, my knees threatening to give out. Husband. They still called him that. After everything, the betrayal, the silence, the ruin, that word still belonged to me. I didn't want it. I didn't want him. And yet, hearing that he had collapsed sent a wave of fear through me I couldn't deny. I'll be there, I whispered before hanging up. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and worry. Machines beeped in the distance. Nurses' shoes whispered against the tile. I walked the sterile hallway until I reached his room and stopped at the glass. There he was. Pale. Fragile. A tangle of wires and monitors surrounding him, and 4 dripping life into his veins. For the first time, he didn't look like the man who had betrayed me. He looked like a stranger, a sick man fighting for breath. I stepped inside quietly. His eyes fluttered open, and when they found me, something raw flickered there. Not arrogance, not charm, not excuses. Just fear. You came, he whispered, his voice raspy. I wanted to tell him I almost didn't. That part of me wanted to leave him there alone, to face the consequences of his choices. But instead, I sat in the chair beside him, hands folded in my lap. Yes, I said softly. I came. The doctor explained it was a mild heart attack. Stress, lifestyle, years of ignoring warning signs. He would recover, but things had to change. Diet, habits, choices. When the doctor left, he turned to me, voice trembling. I thought I had more time. I didn't answer. That was the truth about him. He always thought he had more time. More time to fix things. More time to chase what he wanted. More time to run from what he had broken. Now time had caught him. Over the next few days, I stayed by his side. Not because I forgave him, but because somewhere deep inside, a part of me still remembered the man I once loved. The boy with the crooked grin. The father holding our children in his arms. The man I believed in when no one else did. It wasn't love anymore. It wasn't even loyalty. It was humanity. He was weak, tired, but his words grew heavier with each passing hour. I ruined everything, he admitted one night, voice barely above a whisper. I thought she was the answer. I thought I deserved more. But now, lying here, all I can think about is you. About us. About what I threw away. Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time in years, they weren't manipulative. They weren't crocodile tears. They were real. But the strange thing was, they didn't move me. Not the way they once would have. I didn't feel pity, or longing, or the urge to reach out. I just felt empty. Because his regret came too late. On the 3rd day, a nurse found me sitting by the window. She smiled gently. You're a good wife, staying here like this. I shook my head. I'm not a good wife. Not anymore. She tilted her head. Then why are you here? I thought about that for a long moment. Because I'm not cruel. Because he may not deserve me, but I deserve to walk away with a clear heart. She didn't say anything after that. But her smile told me she understood. When he was finally discharged, the hospital handed us instructions, a list of follow-ups, and a warning. Life changes had to be made, or there wouldn't be a next time. He shuffled out beside me, weaker than I had ever seen him, and for a fleeting second, I remembered all the times I had supported him through sickness, through loss, through failure. Back then, my instinct was always to protect, to carry his weight when he couldn't. But not this time. As we reached the car, he turned to me. His voice cracked. I can't do this without you. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had once built my entire life around was standing before me, stripped of his pride, his strength, his mistress, even his health. And I realized something. I wasn't the weak one anymore. He was. I know, I said quietly. But you'll have to. Back at the house, things felt different. He tried to slip into old patterns, asking me to make his meals, to remind him of his medication, to sit with him when the nights got heavy. But I had drawn my line. I cooked for myself. I laughed with my children. I went to my pottery class, my hair smelling faintly of clay and paint when I returned home. I was no longer his caretaker, his shadow, his safety net. He watched me with hollow eyes, like a man who had lost not just a wife, but an entire world. One night, as I walked past him sitting alone in the living room, he whispered, "You've changed." I stopped, turned slightly, and said, "No. I finally remembered who I was before you." The truth is, the hospital didn't save him. It saved me, because it showed me, with absolute clarity, that life is short. Too short to waste on someone who only learns your value when the ground crumbles beneath him. And from that moment on, I wasn't living for him, or for what we had lost. I was living for me. But just when I thought I had found my footing again, life delivered one final test. The lawyer called. It was time to finalize everything. The lawyer's office was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The polished wood table, the neat stacks of papers, the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, it all felt like a stage set for endings. I sat down on one side, my lawyer beside me. Across from me, he slouched, tie loosened, face still pale from the hospital. For once, he looked small. Not the man who had carried himself with arrogance and charm, not the husband who had claimed 25 years of my life, not the lover who had thrown it all away for someone younger. Just a man. He avoided my eyes at first. But when he finally looked up, I saw it, recognition. He realized I wasn't here as the woman who begged for his attention. I wasn't broken, or desperate, or clinging. I was calm, clear, untouchable. The lawyer began with the practicalities. Property, accounts, divisions, numbers. The words washed over me like static. This wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about freedom. When the divorce papers slid across the table, my heart should have raced. My hands should have trembled. But they didn't. Instead, I felt a quiet strength rise inside me, steady as stone. I picked up the pen, and for the first time in 25 years, I signed something for myself, not for us. He cleared his throat. "Is this really what you want?" I looked at him. Really looked. And the answer came easily. "It's what I should have done years ago." His face crumpled, caught between anger and sorrow. "After everything I've been through, after the hospital, don't you think I deserve another chance?" I leaned forward slightly, voice firm but even. "Another chance? You had thousands. Every late night. Every dodged question. Every time I looked at you, hoping for honesty, for love, for something real. You had a chance. And you wasted them all." His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. The truth stole his words. As the meeting ended, papers shuffled, hands shook, logistics were muttered. But when we stood, he reached out, his hand hovering inches from my arm. "Wait," he said softly. I froze. "I don't know how to be without you." For a moment, those words hung heavy. Once they would have shattered me. But now, they only revealed the emptiness he had built his life on. "That's not my problem anymore," I whispered. And with that, I walked out. The sun was blindingly bright outside, the air fresh and sharp, as if the universe itself was saying, "You made it. You're free." But freedom isn't just paperwork. It's choices. It's waking up and realizing you no longer have to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes. That night, lying alone in bed, I realized something profound. The silence that once tormented me now felt like peace. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of grief and relief. I grieved for the girl I once was, the young woman who gave him her best years, who loved him fiercely, who built her identity around being his wife. She was gone. Mourning her felt necessary. But I also celebrated the woman who had emerged from the ashes. A woman who could sit alone at a cafe with a book and feel whole. A woman who could walk into her pottery class and laugh without restraint. A woman who no longer defined herself by a ring or a man's approval. The world hadn't ended. It had shifted. And in that shift, I found myself. One evening, while cleaning out old boxes, I found our wedding album. The photographs were faded, but the smiles were bright, the promise of forever written across our faces. I held the album in my lap, staring at the girl I used to be. She looked so hopeful, so sure, so unaware of the storm ahead. And instead of bitterness, I felt compassion. She did her best. She loved with everything she had. And now she had survived. I closed the album, tucked it back into the box, and whispered, "Thank you for getting me here." Weeks later, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked thinner, older, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. When he saw me, his face lit up with something desperate, something searching. "Hi," he said awkwardly, clutching a basket. I nodded politely. "Hi." He shuffled closer. How are you?" I smiled. A genuine smile. "Good. Really good." His eyes flickered, like the word stung. "I miss you." I tilted my head. "Do you? Or do you just miss having someone to take care of you?" He swallowed hard, unable to answer. And in that silence I knew he hadn't changed. He never would. I walked away, leaving him in the produce aisle, his smile crumbling into ashes. Because the truth is, he thought losing me would break me. But it didn't. It built me. The first time I realized I was truly free was a random Saturday morning. I woke up late, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the house quiet, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty about it. No one waiting for breakfast. No one tapping their watch, reminding me of errands or chores. I brewed coffee, curled up by the window with a novel, and just existed. Such a small thing, but it felt enormous. I was living on my own clock, not his. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I started piecing together the version of myself I had almost forgotten. I signed up for a painting class. My hands, once used to cooking and cleaning, now smeared with reds, blues, yellows. The first painting I finished wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I traveled with friends, a weekend trip to the mountains, where we hiked until our legs ached and then laughed over wine by the fire. The kind of laugh that bubbles from deep inside, unstoppable. And at night, when the loneliness crept in, I reminded myself, loneliness is better than betrayal. Silence is better than lies. Then came the night that tested me. A friend insisted I join her at a dinner party. I almost said no. The idea of sitting at a table full of couples made my stomach twist. But something whispered, "Go." That's where I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't trying to impress. He was kind. He asked about my paintings like he genuinely cared. He listened. Really listened. And when I caught myself laughing at one of his stories, not the polite kind of laugh, but a real one, I froze. It scared me. Was I ready for this? That night, staring at the ceiling, my heart became a battlefield. Fear on one side, of being fooled again, of giving the best of me only to watch it be discarded. Possibility on the other, that maybe, just maybe, I could feel joy again. The next week, Daniel called. My friend must have given him my number. "Would you like to grab coffee?" he asked, voice steady, warm. I almost said no. My instinct was to slam the door before it even opened. But then I thought of the woman I was becoming, the one who wasn't afraid to take chances anymore. So I said yes. The cafe was small and cozy, filled with the hum of conversations and the smell of roasted beans. My palms were damp, my heart racing. But the moment I saw him, 2 coffees already waiting, one black, one with cream, just in case, my nerves quieted. We talked for hours. Books. Travel. Silly childhood memories. I told him about my messy paint-stained hands, and his face lit up. At one point, I caught myself smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about it. Daniel wasn't a replacement. He wasn't the answer to my pain. He was simply proof that life was still out there. That love didn't have to mean chains. That laughter didn't have to hide knives. He didn't make me forget my past. He reminded me it didn't have to define my future. One evening, after our 3rd coffee, he walked me to my car. The sky was streaked pink and orange. "You're stronger than you realize," he said. I laughed softly. Am I? Some days I still feel like I'm piecing myself together. He shook his head. You're not piecing yourself together. You're rebuilding. And that's harder, but braver. His words stayed with me long after I drove away. Of course, it wasn't easy. There were nights I still woke up angry, moments I doubted myself. But every time the doubts crept in, I reminded myself I had already survived the worst. If I could walk through betrayal and wreckage, I could walk through anything. Months passed, and life began to take shape again. My children visited often, their eyes filled with pride instead of worry. My home, once heavy with betrayal, now echoed with music, laughter, and the scratch of paintbrushes on canvas. And when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman who had been broken but rebuilt herself into something unshakable. The day I knew I had fully reclaimed myself came unexpectedly. I walked into the same grocery store where I had once left him standing, hollow and lost. This time, I wasn't afraid of running into him, because no matter where he was, his power over me was gone, and in its place was something he could never take away: freedom. But before my story could close, something happened that stopped me cold. An envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in handwriting I knew too well. I opened it, and what I found inside was the last thing I ever expected.
The letter trembled in my hands as I unfolded it. His handwriting, once so familiar on birthday cards, notes tucked into lunch bags, grocery lists, now looked foreign, shaky, desperate. The first line stopped me cold. If you're reading this, it means I've run out of ways to speak to you. I sank into the chair, the paper crinkling under my fingers. For a moment, the room around me blurred, the words pulling me back into memories I didn't want but couldn't escape. The letter wasn't an apology, not really. It was a confession. He wrote about the emptiness he carried, the gnawing hole inside him that no amount of love, attention, or affection ever filled. He admitted that chasing youth, chasing excitement, chasing her had been nothing more than running from himself. He said he hated the man he had become. And in the quiet hours of the night, when he lay alone in his bed, he thought of me. Of us. Of the woman he had betrayed and the life he had shattered. You were the only real thing I ever had, he wrote. And I was too blind to see it until it was gone. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. Toward the end, his tone shifted. He spoke of his health, how the hospital scare had left him shaken, how he was afraid of dying alone. I don't want your forgiveness if you can't give it. I don't even want you back, not if it means you would be unhappy. I just want you to know that if I go tomorrow, my last thought will be of you. Always you. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Once, this letter would have cracked me open, sent me running back into his arms, desperate to heal him, to save us. But now? Now, I saw it for what it was, too late. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the table. Then I walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same woman who once clung to his every word. She wasn't the wife who begged for scraps of love, who sacrificed her dreams, her joy, her very self to hold a marriage together. She was different now. Stronger. Wiser. Scarred, yes, but still standing. And she finally understood something vital: closure doesn't come from them. It comes from us. That night, I lit a candle and sat quietly with the letter. I read it once more, slowly this time, not to absorb his pain but to release mine. When I finished, I whispered into the silence, "I believe you're sorry. But that doesn't change who you were, or what you did. And it doesn't change who I am now." Then I struck a match. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash in the flame. His words, his regret, his final attempt at control, gone. I watched the smoke rise, carrying the weight of 25 years out of my life. In the days that followed, I didn't tell anyone about the letter. It was mine, my final chapter, my last tie to him. And by burning it, I wasn't erasing my past. I was closing the book. Life didn't magically become perfect. There were still lonely nights, still echoes of old wounds. But there was also laughter. There was art. There were friendships, long walks in the park, coffee dates with Daniel that reminded me joy could be simple, gentle, real. And one morning, as I stood by the window watching the sunrise, I realized something extraordinary. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Looking back, I don't regret the years I gave him. They shaped me, taught me, broke me, rebuilt me. They showed me what I will never settle for again, what kind of love I truly deserve, and most importantly, the strength I carry inside me. He thought leaving me for someone younger would destroy me. But all it did was set me free. And that, in the end, was my answer. His smile turned to ashes. Mine began anew.